Okay, looking like we're live. Hopefully, everybody can hear me okay. Right now, I am kind of flying solo. Chick is in front of her. Oh, she's typing. She's typing on Twitter. Let's see. Let's see what the situation is. I know she had. We've both had difficulties with our machines this week. She didn't. She said she never received any invite. Huh. See, we've had some really odd technical issues lately. Really weird stuff. Let me go ahead and resend another invite to her. Hopefully, and what I can do is also send her a link, an invite, a link, and just weirdness abounds in terms of technology. I'll also send her an email with the link. So there you go. How do you like that? Anyway, everybody, thank you for showing up. This is the Lost and Found Ben, and I'm your host, SMQ. And my co host, Chick, is going to be joining us shortly here soon. And we talk all things Mandela. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces in the chat. Thank you very much. Hey, Chick, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I can see you there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Awesome.
Awesome.
We are cooking. All right, excellent. I was just telling everybody in the chat that we had a you and I both we've had some issues, right? I mean, we've had some issues in terms of technology for about 2 weeks now, right?
True. Yes.
I know my machine, it's died out at least twice now. So I mean, I don't know about how many times it's died on your side. I'm seeing a lot of people in the chat. We're already jumping up to 18. Hello, Suso. Angelia, hello everyone in the chat. 333 Kingdom, Yellow Sun, Buster as always, Dark Slayer, thank you. All right, we've got a lot of Yellow Sun. If I haven't, Devin, hello, Carol, a lot of great people here, and I'm seeing a couple new faces as well. So what's going on? How's it going this week?
Oh, just watching again the usual the shifts and watching to see what geo changes have taken place. So, from what I'm seeing right now, there seems to be even more changes with Asia, and there seems to be a like tilting of some countries, especially some European countries, kind of tilting in different directions so that they'll eventually fit together with other countries. It's definitely a strange time, and I've been comparing notes with Dark Wolf's Den, and we've been going over a couple of things. So, yeah, definitely interesting things going on right now.
That's very interesting. I've noticed it's probably we're going into week 2 now. I've been noticing that there's been an increase in terms of the pressure on the Mandela Effect community in general in terms of, just today we were talking about this thread on Twitter about there some sort of debunking video from Shane Dawson's brother or something like that. But not just that, but just in general, the vibe I'm getting from some of the videos out there about, the Mandela effect and the way in which it's being portrayed and the way in which it's being handled out in the real world, particularly individuals, MEs, and the way in which they're treated once they sort of come out of the closet as MEs to those that are around them. I'm sort of bringing this up because I'm seeing a lot of new people here and I'm just trying to get them involved and everything. So, what are you thinking?
I just think that it's really crazy and ridiculous that so this Shane Dawson's brother thing, I only looked into it briefly, but apparently in his debunking video, he's talking about Sally Fields, Fields with an S. So, he probably remembers Joel Olstein and everything. And I think eventually, maybe, he'll realize that even though now he's doing debunking videos, he actually has affected memories himself. I guess that it's kind of more difficult in those situations when you have someone that obviously is so adamant against it that they would make a debunking video that have changed memories themselves. Like, what do you even do with someone that's that out of touch, like with themselves and with what's going on around them? I don't
Yeah.
know. It kind of really threw me for a loop.
No, no doubt that he switched back and forth. I didn't even bother finishing with the video because it's really level one, Mandela effects. We were kind of talking about this, and there's sort of levels to the Mandela effect. And certainly, the level one certainly would be pointing out inconsistencies in movie lines, inconsistencies in things like art and things like that. That's sort of a 101 kind of entry thing for Mandela for those that are MEs. And then, there's about 7 or 8 levels that we've been kind of toying around with from there. But certainly, everything that he pointed out, I had to just stop watching because it's been done over and over again for 2 years. And just the fact that you're tripping over you yourself are affected and can't come to terms with that in terms of it being Sally Field or Sally Fields. It's kind of like you said, it's an indicator where you just it's just I immediately lose interest. So it's not something, it's usually something I don't even address. It just seems to be something that is kind of the perfect kind of the capstone to what's been going on in terms of the outside pressures we've been feeling lately inside of the more deeply affected community. Because as I've always described it, there was that first wave about 2 3 years ago where everyone they try to figure out the difference between Kit Kat bars or Forrest Gump or whatever it was, and that was great, and that's sort of a 101 entry level. And then after that you get to the next levels where you start seeing geo changes, and then you get to the next levels where more personal things start happening to you. Then you get to more philosophic levels. Then you get to where we're all of us are at, and all the regulars that we have here in the chat, and you start to understand the difference between the sort of mainstreaming of this idea of the pop culture version of the Mandela effect, and then the spiritual side of what actually it means to be an ME. So there is that. And Angelina, I appreciate you being in the live chat and sort of policing everything for us. Thank you so much. Oh, are you there, chick?
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome, awesome. So, yeah, it just, and then there's just the general crackdowns that have been happening. That's been a big news item too. That's not necessarily anything. It just seems to be all over the place. Just anything fringe seems to be kind of under pressure right now.
True. I mean, it usually is, but I think that the kind of um, aggression that's coming with the opposition to it, maybe because people are seeing weird things themselves and they're afraid. So they think if they deny it as hard as possible, as publicly as possible, that then somehow they've changed that about their, their outlook, or they're trying to like change that they even perceive things that they don't want to see. Because if they didn't perceive it at all and it didn't feel in any way a threat to them, there'd be no reason to be visceral about it. You just
Right.
kind of laugh and say, "Oh, these people just must have, whatever." No one would take it that serious and be like, "Oh, I need to make a video and I need to insist everyone is wrong and I need to, go so far." Especially people with really big platforms. Again, I don't know what I think about that. At least the people that genuinely only have memories from here, you could say, okay, well, they genuinely only remember things this way. So, you can't be mad at somebody about that. But someone that remembers the same things as you and denies it because they're afraid is like a complex psychological issue going on there. But
Absolutely.
it's kind of like everything's been inverted in that what once was fantastical is now logical reality, and they can't make that adjustment in their minds.
Yeah, yeah. And for I'm seeing a lot of new people in the chat, and I just want to kind of for anybody that doesn't understand the storied history that we have at the Lost and Found bin, and particularly for my channel about the 2012 references. It's a show. It's a show that I do now that I'm developing on my own. The We Died in 2012 has sort of become a format show that I'm working on my own that's separate from the Lost and Found bin. And as Chick and I, we've discussed, for anybody new to the chat, to all the old timers in the chat, I do apologize to everybody who's advanced. Um, we oftentimes talk about, and this is one of the higher levels of the Mandela effect, exactly what it is we're dealing with. And of course, we talk about quantum immortality. We talk about the possibility of there being a multidimensional array in terms of existence and reality. We get into all kinds of different things. We obviously talk about Mandela shifts. So we talk about Sagittarius arm versus Orion. We talk about the blending now, it seems to between Sag arm and then Orion spur kind of coming together. So what we try to do is we try to tackle the Mandela effect because we really don't know what it is. We just know that it's real and it's here and it's affecting all of us. Oftentimes, one of the things for some of the newer people that I try to say is that perhaps the Mandela effect could be potentially a naturally occurring event, and that it's something that we're all experiencing now. And we've always experienced. It's just that we can communicate with one of ourselves, and we've never had the possibility of doing that before pre-internet times. And if you were to do that, you would be shut down right away. Then there's the Bible changes. Then there and the Bible changes certainly play into the idea of biblical prophecy, if you're into that, and that the Mandela effect is fulfillment and is a partial fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Then there's obviously the CERN crowd that believes that the Mandela effect is something that's man-made and is created by either nefarious individuals or individuals that did it accidentally, or this is something that was created by a future version of ourselves and we're feeling the effects of time travel. So I'm just trying to get a lot of people that I'm seeing a lot of new people that I'm not used to seeing in the chat here. Also, everyone, including Chick, did you know there's a difference between live chat and top chat? I didn't know that. I heard that tip earlier today, and I switched to live chat. So just if you didn't know about that, Chick, there you go.
Yeah, I like switch it to live chat because I'm afraid like I'll miss something. I'm not sure how the top chat, works, that maybe it doesn't show all the comments. So I'm just
Mhm.
like, yes, I try to watch out on that one for sure. But yeah,
Mhm.
I think also, yeah, for any new people coming in, there's so many different levels to this. And I think that just whoever you gravitate towards more, there's a whole different array of channels taking different perspectives on the effect. And I think that we have a pretty darn good setup here with the different research buddies that we have on Twitter, that we can get together a good reasonable amount of information to try to put together parts of what's happening. I don't think anybody has the full story like on what's happening, but we're at least in part getting there. One of the channels that I was checking out recently that I hadn't really been familiar with before was Dale Dufay and his theories about the Sagittarius Earth arms and these Earths that we're on now. And I thought that his perspective was quite interesting. Like, he has some different memories than what I do, but still a lot of what he says resonates with my memories. And he was saying, obviously about how the Earth on the Sagittarius arm on the outskirts of the Milky Way were so much bigger in size and seemed to be so much older. And at least one trend we can see is kind of the closer we move towards the gravitational center, the smaller the size of the Earths become and the more Pangea-like they become. And I was excited about that because I was like, okay, yeah, it's an obvious pattern, but I never quite put it together in one sentence like that. I have talked about the possibility of a Pangea or a reverse Pangea for 2 years now on my channel, because that seems to be the direction that all the countries are moving. And recently, Asia took an extreme shift in that direction. Like, if any of you have globes or maps, if you look at Australia and Asia right now, you'll see what I mean about all of it pulling together so close. Oh, I'm
Mhm.
sorry, the phone is ringing here. Let me just
No, okay.
turn that off. And yes, so I think as obviously as we shift, we're going to discover more, we're going to see more about what's happening. But I would like to see if that's a trend that continues, or if you go out into whatever different arm that Google says you're currently in, because we're kind of relying on technology or to say which arm of the Milky Way you're actually in, to see what changes actually occur in these different places, if any. And obviously, how much can Google be trusted for which arm we're supposedly in at any given time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, all of that too plays into these shifts. It's not lost on us that these shifts have to do with, the idea that we are dealing with a multi-dimensional, array, of realities here. I want to make sure if anybody's new, to kind of pull them into our language, because it's surprising, Chick, since we've been doing this so long, you and I've just realized with new people in the chat, whenever we talk about these things, we are building that language I've always talked about, and that, all of these shifts and all of these things, if you're not familiar with what we're saying, we're implying that indeed that there is, different dimensions, there is different versions, and whenever a shift happens, what happens is you can kind of fold into or fade into another version of that reality, and sometimes they can be violent, sometimes they can be subtle. Sometimes it's a physical change that happens. Sometimes it's three or four different kinds of things that are happening. So, and each time you sort of we all come together, and it's interesting. We all kind of know, isn't that so strange that we all know and feel like you and I, we were talking with the rest of everyone else in the live chat last week about that big one, that massive one just before New Year's. We all knew it. We just came together and knew it. It was just something natural and easy, and it was something we spoke about without having to sort of send out advanced warning to anyone. It's just something that's natural to all of us now.
That's true. And like at the start, or like at the start of the Lost and Found bin, there was a couple of times where we were surprised that we hadn't spoken to each other, but we both knew that a shift had occurred. And yeah, with this last shift that occurred here, like all kinds of ME people that I know and some that don't know each other were all telling me at the same time that they felt a huge shift. They had physical symptoms. They knew something crazy was happening. So I'm kind of wondering how much that trend is going to keep going, or if it was just something specific that has hit us this one time.
Right. And it's one thing I've noticed is that there's more people that seem to be coming out as ME, and I've noticed that we're getting much more pushback. But I'm feeling, I don't know about you, when we used to get pushback before, I felt as if our backs were against the wall. I almost feel like as if we're getting some sort of momentum now. I mean, is that just me, or do you feel that as well? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, it seems like a lot of the paid opposition people comments have disappeared. I know there are still a lot of crazy comments, but I feel like in 2016 there was an enormous amount of trying to discredit and debunk any talk about this. I think that it's one, the fad phase is over, and two, like when you have hard evidence like you had there with Buster showed us the Ed McMahon reference in the presidential papers, it's really difficult to say, oh well, they just don't remember, or they're just so stupid, when they're giving presidential speeches that they just don't know to fact check that, or it's very difficult to use the usual line of argument to discredit things like that. And I think the more evidence that comes up, people that want to dispute it kind of just get mad and stay quiet and ignore it because they're not really sure how to debunk it, even though they really want to.
Yeah, I tell you what, that was a knock out of the park, wasn't it? I got to tell you, that thing was a home run right there. That is some just right in your. That's one of the hardest residue effect bits of data that I've ever. It was beautiful, wasn't it? What he found, wasn't that amazing?
Yes, it was like so concise and so like written in a way that it'd be almost impossible to argue about what it meant. You know what I mean? It was just very, because it was a note about the speech rather than like a big part of the speech itself. And it specifically mentions Ed McMahon and Publishers Clearinghouse. So obviously this did happen. It's just people then go, oh, well, I can't account for why that's not the record now. So I'm just, going to say the Mandela Effect is fake anyway, no matter how much evidence I get. And I'm like, no, that attitude, that approach is not going to work, especially if the Mandela Effect gets so crazy that things that the usual person can't deny is in their face to that level. denial is only going to work for so long. Like I was saying to one of our Twitter crew earlier, like if this does happen and all the countries are within touching distance or indeed become one country, then the old excuse of, oh, I don't know, I've never looked at a map, or oh, my education wasn't good, like no matter how much people try to argue that, they can't say, oh, it was always one country unless they're completely in denial.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I want to, yeah, Buster, again, man. This was a watershed moment, I think, for all of Mandela, all of the Mandela Effect community, and we owe, a big thank you. And that was just it. I felt like something big had happened. Like there was, like you said, there was something just undeniable about it. There was something so official about it, and I think it had a lot to do with the fact that it wasn't commercial, it wasn't pop, it wasn't, it was something that was very powerful, and the fact that it was something very official and frankly boring. It was like C-SPAN had admitted that the Mandela effect was real. That's the way that I felt. I'm like, oh my God, C-SPAN just admitted the Mandela effect was real. Like NPR just admitted the Mandela effect. Yeah, it's a thing. Like it is something that's real. Because again, I went back to what I was saying. Bill Clinton had a plethora of fact checkers. And don't think when you're the president of the United States, even offhand comments you make, they are tested. They are, or at least back then when politicians were a bit different, they were tested. People made sure that, every movement and everything you said was, it affected a certain demographic and it was okay and everybody got it and everybody was on the same page. This is very important, that even throwaway things like this were probably very well, planned out. So this was something that was very important. I just felt like we had a watershed moment here this last week.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sure how relevant it is to the case because the case is already extremely strong. But
Oh yeah.
the Clintons had a lot of people working for them, fact checking them, working on their PR, their image, everything. They had this oh, I forget the name of them now, but it was like this British international PR company, working specifically to make sure that they were relatable and they were on top of things, and they were, so it's not just like, oh, Bill wrote this himself and he didn't know what he was saying. It would have gone through several hands first to make sure he was saying the right things to the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was just a different time than it is now, where it's just, you just throw something up on Twitter. This was very delicate and concise, and it was just very different. It was a very different time, and I remember that time. So I'm old enough to remember that. And you just, something off the cuff that was not acceptable. So that probably went through, I'm just guessing, but I'm saying a minimum of 3 layers of people. Even just offhanded comments had to go through a minimum of 3 layers of fact checkers to make sure that you're absolutely on point. It's nothing like it is nowadays. So, I know I'm showing a bit of my age by doing that, but it was really awesome. And I feel as if maybe, the case had already been made and was very powerful, obviously, but I just feel like this piece of evidence here is something that is, it's set aside, and it's a bit different because it's now moved into the governmental era, or section. We're not really dealing with pop. We're not dealing with geo. We're dealing with almost like a new kind of ME, even though it's in reference to an old kind of ME, but we've moved into a new area. And indeed, if there is more, if there's someone out there with another channel or whatever, we'll certainly cover it. If you have the wherewithal to go through old C-SPAN, or you have the wherewithal to go through old government papers or old NPR, or something a bit more official and kind of boring, but something like that, and you find Mandela effects, or are they making references, that would just add even more power to this.
It's true because, like, even though the newspaper residue is substantial and I really like it, there's always this argument made of, oh, they just had a typo, or oh, they just didn't know. But with things that are, like you said, they're gone over a couple of times by a couple of different people, it just kind of adds even more weight to it. I mean, I know it's kind of like the paranormal in that if you don't see it, you probably won't believe it no matter how much evidence is presented to you. And if you do
True.
see it, you don't need evidence presented to you. But I think
True.
that it's good to have a couple of things that are bulletproof. So when people start trying to say, oh, well, I'm afraid of it, so I'm going to fight you till the ends of the earth to say it's not happening. You could say, look, here's these couple of points here that are pretty indisputable. So, just think about, it's not that scary. There's so many people that are all come together, that are all looking out for each other, gaining new understanding of reality, of life, of what we're doing here. I think people are just so sucked into life is just do your job to put gas in the car to get to your job, to pay for gas to put in the car to get in the job. Like, they forget about the bigger picture of life and how it we're not supposed to be just so small detail oriented. We're supposed to look around in all directions. There's still many mysteries about this thing to be uncovered, and I don't think that we should be afraid of finding out more about what's going on. I think it's actually a great thing when we look at it, because otherwise we would never have known any of this was happening if we'd never seen the Mandela Effect. How would you know? Maybe there'd be one person that nobody listens to, but with as many people as we are, and especially people in different countries that don't know each other, all saying, yes, this is happening, I think it's pretty safe to say that a large amount of the population are affected and silent, and then another section like us are affected and loud about it.
No, I agree totally. And it is. It has, and it's one of those things where, like you pointed out earlier, it's one of those tricky things where you can end up looking, I don't want to say foolish, but you can, because I want all MEs to kind of self-accept, but it's one of those things where if you're going to do a debunking video, you have to make sure that the words you use, you parse properly. Because if you're going to say Sally Field, like you said, and then Sally Fields, that's a Mandela effect. You just did it right in front of all of us. And it makes people that are more advanced, or, the pop culture side of it, the side where it was clickbait 2 years ago, the rest of us that stayed through this and we've been here this whole time, you kind of, it kind of makes us, well, for me, I stopped watching the video one, so there is that. But it is true. There is more to life. And we have this wonderful technology now where we can experience these things together. And those of us that have been doing this the whole time, the last 2 years, particularly, people I'm seeing in here like Michael, and, this, all the people that we experience this together, and we bring it every week together. We bring something new, it, you end up with things like you and I talking about Andy Warhol and the moon, and it becomes a thing, with us. And it's so great if we can get more people involved, because then it becomes actually more real. Because the thing about the Mandela effect is it becomes more real because we've realized that reality is something that is shifting and is movable and isn't set. And the idea of the supremacy of the present, and that the past has to be completely silent and it's over and it has no say whatsoever. Those days are over. Those days are done and it's over with. And the idea that the future is something that has a hold over us, those days are done too. So we all think in this new way that's so powerful. And the great thing too is that you have in me a host that is sympathetic to all people who have all different kinds of belief systems. I really feel for people who are out there searching and they have different belief systems than I do. And I'm not gonna shoot you down, and I hope you wouldn't do the same to me. It's just it's about mutual respect, really.
Yes, and I think that another aspect of the effect and of seeing more into reality is because the future isn't holding, it's not shadowing down upon you. It kind of upsets the apple cart for the rest of the truther community. I mean, not the entire thing, but there is a certain section of the truther community that's built around being afraid of the things that are coming. And I feel
Yes.
like we've been completely released from that completely. I feel like that has no bearing on us anymore, because the things that, from personal experience here of like the moon being hit and all these other strange things happening, of missiles that never landed in Hawaii, and then the next day in Japan the exact same thing happened. A missile disappeared in midair that was headed right for them. Like, it just seems like these things that in a linear construct where it's like, oh no, something bad is coming up and we can't get away, and then you stew in your own fear and it's all terrible. That's just completely gone now, which is one of my favorite aspects of all this, is you don't need to worry about kind of being foreshadowed or bullied by the future. I mean, you might be more concerned about what's going on in the past, but it seems to have kind of balanced out a lot more into kind of a more comfortable medium. And maybe there will be a bit of resistance about that because that kind of thinking is very ingrained in people because it's connected to, oh, if I'm afraid about it, then I'm more conscious of my own safety and I'm more conscious of, all these other things, and I need to keep up on every single update. And it's just like, I don't know, I feel like we've been released from that kind of fear cycle.
Yeah, yeah, that's another great thing to point out. Brilliant thing to point out is that that watershed moment was you're right. It got our backs off the wall. It added an amount of power. I don't know how to explain it. I just feel it. And then yes, I feel as if we added a new lens or we refocused our lens. We changed the paradigm of this idea, this fear-based sort of truther kind of fringe thing is just it's completely obsolete. I mean, it can be if you want it to be, but you have to be able to embrace what we're doing here. And that's something that we're doing this together. I mean, all of us, including everyone from the beginning in the chat, that we're all doing it. And even that what dead GPK is talking about with the yellow sun, it's something that's very that's sad about the yellow sun, but yet the way we talk about it and the way we approach it and everything is still you know how about this, the way that a lot of channels would have said, oh my gosh, the sun is white, it's no longer yellow, run for the hills, buy sort of whatever product another channel would be trying to push or whatever, and buy a concrete bunker in the side of a mountain or whatever. And that's sort of been that kind of mentality. And for us, I think we take a more kind of sleuth, aesthetic to it. I think is our whole ethos to the whole thing. What do you think?
I think now, yeah, but I would say like before, the effect kind of before I sat down and thought about the ramifications of the effect and watching it happening in front of me, I was kind of very much sucked into a lot of the fear thinking and a lot of, you know, um, trying to figure out what to do and what might be going to happen and what's being said in the truther community and who knows. And I was like basically forced out of that by the Mandela effect. It was kind
Yeah.
of like, no, you're not in a linear progression. I mean, you can worry about it if you want, but it doesn't happen to you anymore. You're outside of that now. So I think maybe I just caught on super late, but it was literally by watching things happen in a non-linear kind of way that made me realize that not only could I not be in that mind frame anymore, but it was just like I said, I feel like I'm never going to be in that mind frame again. Like I feel like I can let that go completely.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just if you look back over and over again, and next week this is going to happen, or 6 months from now this is going to happen, and it never happens. Then this is going to happen, and you're right. If you want to find relevancy and you want to sort of use something in time, if you're still going to try to use an old paradigm that's outdated, like time, I think, like Chick said, you'd be better served to look in the past because the past and the way the past is changing and the way the past moves. And what, for a while, what we were uncovering, myself, Chick, and Agent Asian Smith, and others too as well, Carolyn and others, we were finding more and more each week. If you uncover things, it's the past and that's the trick. And that's the big secret that I think a lot of people miss out on, is that it's not the future. The future is just something that's sort of abstractly made up to ensure that you pay your bills. We're talking about the past. That's where it's at. And it's the past is where real human beings did real things. And if you come to the conclusion and you're comfortable with the idea that it still is happening at the same time that the present's happening, then you realize that it's the past that is where you need to direct all of your attention. And that's the important thing out of all of this, that anyone, that wants to walk away with something, is stop looking in the future. It's doing nothing for you. It's the past you need to look at, and look for the changes in the past. Well, obviously it's one component. We have the geo and everything else that goes on in the present. But if in terms of a linear time, get rid of that. We have only the present, and the past in its own way has become an equal partner and the quote unquote present.
For sure. And I think, yeah, the past, like things will happen that kind of affect the present, and then the geo changes is kind of the present affecting the past. So
Hmm.
they kind of loop off of each other. And it's not always as neat as you would think it was, because there's different parts of history coming in at different times and then disappearing again, and just different strange things happening like that. But I do see kind of a feedback loop between the past and the present over and over, whereas the future is really kind of wishy-washy. It's just kind of the past and the present can somewhat determine what's going on with the future, but you can also just shift into a completely different situation, just like people coming straight from the Sagittarius armor Earths to these Orion armor Earths, where it's just such a wild 180-degree shift that it's not even the present and past time looping that would cause something like this. It's something even wilder and outside of the box, something more superpositioned and crazy, um, to the point where it's just like I was thinking about last night and kind of the night before about what I just mentioned there about kind of seeing these younger and younger planet Earths and seeing the trajectory of what it would be like to see how far that history goes back, because we're not sure. We make estimations in our history books, but already there's been two supercontinents predating Pangea that have come up on Wikipedia and in different literature about the ancient supercontinents. So it's kind of interesting to see the past kind of unveiling itself as the future as we keep shifting and we keep seeing different terra forma come up.
Well, I talk about sort of we don't have access really to the truth. I kind of talk about that, like the real truth. And I talk about people who are layers and layers above us, that are incredibly powerful. They sort of have access to the truth. I mean, one thing that you could say about the truth, and I mean the broader truth of like what Chick is talking about in terms of Pangea, in terms of the past, in terms of, what is it the Smithsonian, what is their actual real purpose? What is it they're here to do? Are they actually here to deliver the truth for us, or are they here to rewrite a narrative of a past that they're trying to keep contained, because that past is alive and it keeps bucking like a horse that just won't be broken. So, you have all kinds of organizations that work on the past, and the only organizations that work on the future are organizations that you wouldn't even give respect to. And those are organizations that promote fiction and promote things like that, because well, it's money and fiction. Those organizations are the ones that ignite the fire in people's minds where they can pull down from the quote unquote future. The future is where sci-fi resides. The future is where the rockets come from. And the future, I use a very controversial figure, Jack Parsons. He believed in the concept of the future. He believed in the science fiction of the future of rockets when they didn't exist. He pulled those down from a fiction and pulled them into this present time and created that out of whole cloth, out of nothing. That's powerful. So you have the purpose of the future, I think, is something that, because we don't have access to the real truth, I think the purpose of the future is something that we can't even begin to comprehend. The only thing that we have access to in terms of the truth about the future is on regular people like us. It's used on us in order to keep us in line and in order for us to keep sort of the rat race going. But in terms of people who are designated or people that may have special gifts or whatever it may be, the future is probably not exactly what we think it is. Now, what you said was interesting about the past, that eventually it could loop around like that snake's tail. And if we look far enough back, we may see ourselves in the distance past, and literally ourselves, like you, a version of you, or you and me in the past, if you go back far enough, potentially. But of course, you have to have access to instruments and all kinds of other techniques in order for. I think you and I have stumbled on by accident a technique when we did the Andy Warhol thing. That's why I bring that up over and over again. I do it because I want people to remember, but I also do it because I think you and I think we did that. I think we did it by accident. And I'm not boasting. I just think it was something that you and I did by virtue. But it was just an accident. It was just the Moon Museum. And yes, it's just a tablet. But when you have, a chat room of 30 or 40 people, at the time it was 15 or 20, and then me and you, and we concentrate all of our efforts on, Andy Warhol and the moon and, water parks and things like that, you eventually you get what we got, and it's always stuck with me. Has it stuck with you? Have you ever thought about that?
I have, and it kind of fits into the discussion about truth in that in the kind of old way, the old linear time dimensions. I think the elite people, like you mentioned there, they have the truth and they live these kind of lives separate from us, and we don't have access to that. But in this place here, in this kind of superposition timeline reality, we're the ones who have access. We're the ones who have the memories. We're the ones who are seeing all the different worlds and everything. The people who have loads of money and speedboats, a lot of them are just anchored to one place and they don't know anything. Or they might be shifting a little bit, like Shane Dawson's brother, but they don't know anything. So there's no point in
Yeah.
having the truth in front of you. If you haven't seen it yet, then it's not something that can affect your outlook on what's actually going on. It's not empowering you because you don't see that you have it yet. So that's kind of another thing that's empowering about this, is being free of the fear cycle of the future, and also just having the access to this knowledge, to this Mandela Effect knowledge, and not having to be a billionaire, not having to be some kind of crazy special person or some kind of whatever it is that the people that were the old guard of the elite, whatever it is that they had. We don't need to have that. It's like we've been just given this special VIP access where we're seeing all these kinds of things, and it's just, seems to be just designated to all these different people. We've tried to figure out what our common bonds are and what our common ground is and everything. But for the most part, that's still a work in progress to see why these specific people are so Mandela affected and other people aren't. And then also, I think about the times when I was in in the linear timeline kind of realities, and when I would see something that was kind of weird about or glitchy about the present or the past or something, it made me wonder if I was maybe having a glimpse into this kind of reality, almost like how in different levels of dimensions different things exist. Like in 2D it's just a flat square, and in 3D it's a cube.
Yeah.
Maybe every now and then you get a little glimpse of the cube. It's not that the cube doesn't exist, it's just you're not in the same space as it. So maybe the Mandela effect was existing in this kind of separate reality here, and every now and then we bob our heads up and down into that space, and now we're here permanently.
Yeah. Someone brought up here in the chat, and I appreciate that, about the work that we were all doing in World War II, and how we found that indeed if anybody didn't is just new here, when we were doing our research into World War II, we found that Alaska had been invaded by Japan now in this timeline, and that it was held territory, that Oregon was bombed, that Washington State was bombed, also shelled off the coast of Santa Barbara. I forget exactly where. That and we kept digging. I stopped digging. It started scaring me so much, and that there were over 5,000 civilians killed off the coast of the Outer Banks. It was called Torpedo Alley. Also, too, we had somewhere in. I keep wanting to say Jacksonville, but it's not. But we actually had not only sightings but actual German troops in Florida. So there's all kinds of strangeness, and what happens is it starts as a slow roll, and eventually it grows and grows and grows. And my hope was that by pulling back, maybe, we pulled back, hopefully on that roll, because it was getting to the point when it's terrified me, Chick, was that when Britain had to surrender to the Axis powers, Singapore, and it was, as Winston Churchill said, was the worst defeat in British naval or all of the British Empire and all of its history. So, anyone new to the channel, go, you can jump back to those World War II episodes and check it out, and go look yourself. It's all out there for you. It's and it's small. All of these things are small, but that's what matters. Just like what Buster found, all of these, like a side note, but these things matter. They're very big things. They're very small facts that have very big ramifications to everyone's mind, you know? And you're right. If you dip your head enough into these different dimensions enough, eventually you shift into and you stay there. And it's almost as if a lot of new MEs have shifted in this last major shift. And I just feel like something's completely different right now. It's very different.
I would agree with that. It's definitely requires, sitting down and thinking about reality as it is now and trying to live as it is now, because the old reality will kind of stay around you for a while because you've been in it so long that you'll still be acting as if you're in linear time, even though you're not. And I'm definitely guilty of that. I have to remind myself all the time, like, that's not reality anymore. What am I doing? It seems logical because I was in linear time for so long, but that's literally not what's going on in the world around me. And it's kind of hard to like wake up to that fact sometimes. And
Yep.
yes, the World War II work, I think, was some of the most important work. One of the biggest points, and definitely something that hit me the heart, one of the hardest things. And I would like to say it's still going on. The shifting is changing how the outcomes of different things are happening. I've spoken on my last stream, and whenever I get to do my next stream, I'll speak again on it about the how Europe is all kind of crunching together. And one of the things that has changed in World War II is the UK is getting closer and closer and closer to France. And there are islands in the Channel now that were actually occupied by the Germans during the war. And that's completely foreign history to me. The English Channel was a lot bigger. I measured from, I believe it's from New Romney. I'm trying to zoom here on the name because this part of England isn't even familiar to me. Yeah, from kind of the tip of New Romney to the land tip below Calais, and it's about 21 miles. So the distance between Dover and Calais, so Dover is the UK side and Calais is the French side, is right now said to be 30 miles. So that is not very, very far. You know what I mean? And it's already affecting how things are going on. And one of the first things I said when I saw that was, oh my gosh, Nazi occupied France. Like, it's barely a hop and a skip over. And even when France was much further away, England got a lot of, trouble from the Nazis during the Second World War. So I was like, this is definitely one of the things that is going to affect it. Now, whether it affects the overall outcome, we don't know. But as far as the war stories go, it's definitely changing a lot of history.
Well, I think what terrified me the most was, and when I stopped, because the problem is we're discovering this reality and we don't know what powers as human beings we have, because in order to change the present in the old reality, if you wanted to build a fence, you would have to take your hands and you would have to either hire someone or you would have to, dig a hole and put the post in and then, build the fence. And that's how you changed reality. You wanted a chair, you either went and bought it and you assembled it yourself, or you created your own chair. And now that we're in this new reality, my fear was that we were somehow enhancing or somehow speeding up this process of this kind of change. And I still don't know if that's the case or not. But what I will say is that once the UK lost Singapore, and there were almost 1 million Allied soldiers that were on essentially a death march, and that Australia was fighting for its very life. And D-Day, Canadians were being pulled from D-Day to fight and help in the Pacific theater. I knew things were changing in the battle, and that's when I was fearful of, if this is naturally occurring, then someone else also knows that this is naturally occurring, and they too are using this is to change sort of history and how these theaters were conducted. And then my fear was, if we were somehow, expediting this, and we were communicating this. So, that's why I stopped. But I also, understand that, the Rock of Gibraltar, that too also helped me pull away a bit. Once that was pulled away from between Spain and Morocco, and it became a random peninsula attached to Spain, I knew, a couple of things was that, um, it was either in the way for what you're talking about, the eventual reformation of the Pangea, or there was something, you know, uh, 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 political, or something, I don't know, something to do with it in terms of like geopolitical strategies in World War II. And that's why anyone that's new here, you have to look into the past, because it's the past is where the news is, not in the present, not this fictitious future. The past is going to dictate to you how you will live your life, because we've seen the changes happen. And now we started hearing from people whose grandfathers were in the war, and they don't believe it, or couldn't believe it, and it didn't have, or it had changed for them. I think, didn't we have someone saying that their grandfather was in D-Day, and they remember Canadian troops being part near their regiment or something like that, and then now they look back and those troops are no longer there. They had been pulled, and those troops are now were fighting in the Australian theater, because Australia, and I think it's Darwin, the Battle of Darwin, where Australia basically fought for its freedom and its own life.
Yes, that did happen. And I remember like how emotional it was for that person, having had
Yes.
a few Twitter conversations with them. And that was another part of it too. Is like it wasn't that long ago. And there's a lot of people that their grandfathers or their fathers or someone in their family was involved with World War II. So it's very scary for them when it starts moving and changing all over the place from what they remember and from what they're, familiar with. And then not only for it to change, but for it to change again and again and again. Because a couple of the changes that we saw came into reality and then went out again. And I don't know if that's because more geo shifts came in or because other things happened concurrently in the past that changed the present that we were viewing.
Oh, wow, that's really amazing. And I've got a feeling we're going to put this puzzle together one day, and that, hopefully we can sort of get that superposition view, because I do believe that there is a superposition view, and I believe that we have the ability to kind of see that from the flatness from a point of superposition. We've got to put it all together. And I think this show, and I think everybody in the chat and everybody who does the research, I think we're getting, every day we get closer to it, and then we have wonderful moments like what we had here with Buster. So it's just great stuff.
Yes. And it's happy when those things come in. I hope that stays in existence now because that's a huge key point. And I actually hope more things like that come into that residue would come into the same space or the same reality that we're in so that we can again have more things to put forward when we're putting forward our case, because we don't want to be boxed into this thing of, oh, it's just your memory, or oh, it's just a bunch of you with a memory. We want to say it's not just our memory. Here's not only people that don't know each other, but evidence, people who were involved or people whose family members were involved. Or because I think even with the most obvious things, to us it's super obvious about World War II and what happened, but other people have mixed memories, so it's not a slam dunk for them. I
Right.
was amazed at the amount of people who don't see any change with the location of Australia, and it's creeping up to the point where it's almost touching the equator, and they don't see it's not a home run, it's not a slam dunk for them. It's not like, oh my gosh, things are changing. They're just kind of like, I don't know, I don't really remember where anything was. So in that, to have as much evidence as possible is necessary. I was also surprised about someone I thought had memories of the old world. They said they always remember the Suez Canal, and they always remember Africa being so close to Europe, and to, that they always remember a whole bunch of things that to me are obvious Mandela effects. And then it becomes a little bit trickier with people who have mixed memories about what's going to be that thing that really wakes them up. Really wakes them up. What is their Ed McMahon moment? Because that's
Right.
what you really need to get people onto that next level, is when are they going to have their Ed McMahon moment, you know?
Exactly. And there's someone here new, I think they said, are we responsible for the outcomes in our reality? Honestly, where are we going with this? It seems like that our abilities can control outcomes. Yes, and that's sort of this person A too. Welcome one, but that's exactly what we're talking about: the ability to be responsible for the outcomes in your reality. First, even in old Earth, you were responsible for the outcomes into your reality for the most part. I mean, that was already there mostly. It was just in the way that I was describing it. If you decided that you wanted to go out and have a chair, then you would go and buy a chair. And then that evening you would have a place to sit in your home, and that was you changing the outcome of your reality. What we're talking about though is there the potential of us, by doing research and using our intention and our concentration and our powers of being, rather than being focused and using that focus on fear and terror and the future, we refocus that, and we kind of roll with the punches of the Mandela effects and those shifts. And by doing that, are we able to free up sort of some of that battery that were these human batteries, and that we're able to take some of that energy and use it for ourselves. And by doing that, and by doing that kind of research, I'm still at that point that I want to make sure that we're not doing some kind of damage. And I'm not sure that we're there, but I also know that we can't stop out of the very thing that we were talking about, which is fear, which is what we're trying to free ourselves from. Because certainly, since we've started this channel, and before I get into that, I also want to say it's a long narration, and that's exactly what I think Chick and I and everyone else on Twitter that are our friends, and everybody else in the chat that are our friends. This is a ongoing slow roll narration that is evolves as we go. And we're all learning this together. And you certainly are welcome to join us. And you'll see over time, it's a very odd and strange thing. We went from just thinking, just saying something just by accident, and then it happened, and then we just start saying other things, and then we start digging where we think it's just ridiculous, and then more and more comes up, and it builds and it builds, and it becomes more and more real and more powerful. And then somehow you get these different epiphanies, and you just start to understand, like Chick was talking about, you kind of dip your head in for just a second to this other reality for just a second. And if you can stay there long enough, eventually you stay, and you get this new kind of perch, where you can see kind of that new superposition that you're at, and you can kind of see better the flatness below you. And that will make sense if you stay, which everyone who's new, please come back and stay with us. But you'll understand if you stay long enough. Sorry, I was ranting.
No, no problem. I was just gonna say hi, A2, and also that yes, it's kind of like if you can free yourself from fear, if you're not in fear, then you don't need to worry that your fear would have an outcome on what's going on. And we're not sure, again, like how much is what we as observers, how much effect does that actually have on the things that are going on, because there are obviously other observers, people in the past that are literally going through things. So even on the scientific, point where they say, oh, well, being a conscious observer actually alters how particles and waves behave, you could say, yeah, but when you have multiple observers, which observant force is the most dominant? So I don't think that we can take full blame, even if that did turn out to be a fact, because there's so many different factors involved. And again, we're not sure even if that is a fact. It might just be that these things are happening all the time in the background as history is kind of tetrising itself together and exploding apart, and tetrising back together and exploding apart. Um,
Good
We're
point.
not responsible for if the coastline changes and that's made life easier or harder or something. We might react to it and say, oh, that's cool, or oh, that's not good, but I don't think we can say, "Oh my gosh, I was on vacation on that coastline, and therefore it changed because I was thinking about that coastline a lot." I don't think we can take on that kind of responsibility unless somebody wants to take on that kind of responsibility, and then I have no idea what kind of situation you're going to get yourself into mentally and otherwise. Because there are a lot of people that have taken on the thing of that they control their reality and they create their reality and everything. And I'm like, that's a lot of responsibility to take on. If you're in a great place and you want to take that kind of perspective, that's great. But I think for a lot of us, we're explorers and students in this whole thing rather than being masters and that kind of situation. I'm not speaking for everyone. I'm just saying like a lot of us are just open-eyed and trying to learn what's going on, and that's where I am. Definitely, I don't want to make any assumptions about exactly what our roles are here, but obviously we need to be here because we are here. And if that wasn't the situation, we'd still be in the linear time, and we'd still be, on whatever planet Earth you remember, whatever layout of the map you remember.
Yeah, and that's a good point because we never concentrated as a group and said, okay, we want the Mandela effect where the UK actually surrenders to the Axis forces Singapore, and we want the worst defeat of the British military or the British Navy or whatever whatever Churchill said. We never concentrated and said that we wanted to do that. So you're right. That's a great point to make about that. And specifically for the changes on the west coast of the U.S., the changes in D-Day, the changes in geo shifts in terms of Gibraltar, and now the changes between in the Channel, in the British Channel. It's just it's you're right. It's a lot of responsibility, and I don't think we have that kind of power. And that kind of brings me, fortunately, which makes me feel better, brings me back to this is a naturally occurring thing, in that we're merely, for the first time, we're able to observe this, and we have the technology to actually talk to one another about something that was always here. And for people who are new, the way I talked about that too was, imagine if you were from the desert, and I'm talking, prehistoric times. I'm talking pre-Babylon, pre-cuneiform, pre all that, and you were to do a trade route with Scandinavia, and you were to see for the first time snow, and you couldn't describe it, and you couldn't imagine that the planet was capable of contorting itself to that way. And then you bring back and tell people, and they just won't believe you. They just don't believe it. And then the same thing, people in Scandinavia, they go to the Nile, the Euphrates, wherever it may be, and they conduct trade with you. And then they come back and say, there's this stuff, and they're trying to describe sand. It's like snow, but it won't melt, and it's hot. It's the exact opposite of snow. And that's it took a leap in technology and commerce, just like with the internet, for people to come together and be able to explain and describe that the earth is capable of so much mystery that we're just now here, and we're able to go, yeah, man, it's a lot weirder than we thought. What's a lot weirder?
Indeed. I see there's someone trolling in the comments that's actually called himself Nelson Mandela. That's kind of funny.
Oh,
Good grief.
awesome.
They went to all the trouble of naming their channel. I wonder if they were just a random channel that didn't set out to intentionally troll this effect by having that channel name. Like, kind of, it's a little bit obvious there, guys. At least,
Right.
come up with a name and pretend you have other interests and stumbled across this and, oh, it's just stupid. The
Right.
usual ball game.
Right.
Don't name your channel, I'm here to debunk the Mandela effect. I just happened upon this. I'm sorry, this is
Right.
too ridiculous.
Right. Right. All right. Anyway, we're getting close to that hour. So what we want is for you to keep, coming back for more. And so we want you to come back next week. And we appreciate all of our new viewers, and we hope that you come back. Certainly, we hope you So, oh, and yes, I'm sorry. I'm not going to be here next week. I'm sorry. I am going out of town. Um, I'm not going to be here. I'm so sorry.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Yeah, so for all of our new viewers, it's gonna have to be the week after. But look, hey, Chick, she always has things going on with her channel. And please, everybody go over there and sub to her channel. Just type in Chick and Mandela Effect, and you can find her channel right away. And sub over there. And so, but the Lost and Found bin, I won't. I'll be traveling this week. I will be with everybody on Twitter still with the Scooby Crew on Twitter, but the Lost and Found bin won't be around next week because I'll actually be on the road. But the week after we'll be back.
Good
So
stuff.
excited.
Yeah, I'll try and do a stream. Suso was asking, he's like, Chick, do a stream. So my channel is more like a big long stream. So just whenever you have time to listen to snippets or to watch like the map, I'll do like a roundup of the geo changes. So it is very different to the Lost and Found bin, just for anyone that's that wants to see more and they can't wait till the week after. But yeah, hopefully we'll have a great Lost and Found bin coming up as soon as SMQ gets home.
Yeah,
Not
excellent, excellent.
next weekend, but after that.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for showing up, and again, we will catch you the week after next. Thanks.